Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America, brought to you by Accuracy in Academia. I'm your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Good morning. Hello, deplorables, drags, despicables, chumps, Neanderthals, semi-fascists, maggots, and of course those dog-faced pony soldiers.
I think this is one of the rare occasions where my hair's shorter than yours.
Yeah, how about that?
We weren't on the same syncing of getting
Yeah,
our
you
haircuts at the
beat
same
me
time.
to the barber this time.
I told my wife, I'm like, it's just getting to be too much. I mean, I don't necessarily have a ton of hair, but you get that feeling. And I was going to cut the grass. I'm like, less hair is, I just would be better for this.
Right. This time of year, like the next time I go, I'm just going to get it, deal with it later.
Yeah. Yeah. As we get older, we will cherish the hair that we had.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, but also another good thing about getting older is like you really don't care about impressing people with your looks.
Yeah.
It's over. You got what you're going to get, and there's no more crushes or any of that kind of stuff going on. It's just straight ahead.
All right. Wait a minute. So when was the last time you needed to impress somebody with your looks, right?
More than 20 years, in case my wife is watching. More than 20 years.
Right answer. Yeah, I know. It's kind of funny. It's like, I'm like, do I really need to care about? I mean, you should keep yourself up, right? I mean, that's
Right.
always important. You should, but at the other time, it's just like this is not about primping ourselves because we're old married men now. We've been at this game. We've been doing this for a long time. We've been parents and husbands for a long time now. So what we don't need is we're not impressing anybody for that. Not that I'm sure anybody was really impressed with my looks to begin with, except for my wife.
Right with you. We had to do it with our charm.
That's right.
Had to work harder.
That's a whole nother thing. Just as one more side before we really get going, is that it's interesting to me as I've gone through life and seen couples and gotten to know people and things like that, that the perceptions I had when I was younger, that it had to be it always had to be the physical attraction, so the good looking people always married each other and whatnot, and that was always the kind of thing. But personality plays a huge part in this, right? There's chemistry that's involved in this. I mean, you can have a couple good looking people, but they could be just a couple of dolts. They really don't. They're kind of
they don't laugh at the same things. They don't.
Right.
They don't view faith and family the same way. It doesn't matter, right? You got to find people you can get along with. There's, it's like it's been a long time since our looks had anything to do with this, right? It's your, and you think about like, every time you go in a restaurant, the cast of characters changes, but the constant is, your wife is with you, right? Every time you're sitting on a park bench waiting on something to start, the cast of characters around you is different, but your wife is there, right? It's you and her side by side all the way through life, and so, I want to keep her happy, right? I want her to have, what she wants and address whatever she comes up with as needs or whatever. But, the rest of these people, I mean, I've made my choice, and that's who I'm supposed to take care of.
Right. Yeah. My wife is the case in point because she's off shopping again. I don't stop her.
I was playing golf one time, and I asked these guys if I could play through. And they're like, why? There was 4 of them and 1 of me. So it kind of made sense to play through. And I said, well, I dropped my wife off at the mall and she's spending money till I get done and get back. And they're all like, right through, sir.
I like that. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. All right. You're kind of my climate expert here and everything. Whether we've had some. I mean, it's been kind of warm and hot, and I mean, I cut the grass yesterday.
Warm May, yeah.
Yeah, I cut the grass yesterday, and I'm like, I'm about halfway through, and I'm thinking like, why am I cutting the grass? I realized my neighbor, who is considerably younger than I am, and he used to cut his own grass. I saw one of the landscaping companies, those kind of guys, and we have everybody hires a different group. I don't know that any of these homeowners in here uses the same person, maybe a couple of them or whatever, but it
Right.
always seems like to be a different, truck and trailer and every crew and everything like this. And I'm like, when did he finally give up mowing his own lawn, which is smaller than my lawn, and turn this over? And it started making me think, it's like, am I getting too old for this? Or is it, maybe it was just the heat saying like, it's just, what are you doing out here, you dummy? You could have just paid somebody $40 or whatever and be done with it. Though there's a little bit of satisfaction when I do it myself, but it takes a while to recover from that. It's like you come in the house and it's like sweating to the nines.
You're in traction, waiting on that satisfaction.
Well, so anyway, so the World Meteorological Association, is saying that there's a good chance that now we're going to switch from El Nino to La Nina this summer. What does this all mean? I mean, how has those weather patterns, how have these affected us? And what we're likely to see in your opinion?
We were in a La Nina for a long time, and it generally means milder winters here. And it's milder both ways for the eastern U.S. Milder summers, milder winters. El Nino means more violent weather for most of America. So if it goes, and that's what we've had lately. Like we've had some really strong storms, and down south they've had some horrific rain, and 60, 70 inches in some places. And that's the kind of things you get with El Nino. It's unpredictable and it's violent, and these are big storms that create their own problems, right? And La Nina is a move back to what we thought of for the previous 20 years as normalcy.
So are we? So are we going to have a decent summer then, or what do you think?
Yeah, we'll have a decent summer. It could be warm, but we haven't had a warm summer in a long time, so we're kind of due for one.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people that our summers can tend to be hot and humid, but we haven't had a lot of these things where you get 2 weeks worth of 90-degree weather and 90% humidity type of thing.
I think we had 4 90-degree days last year or something like it. Insanely low amount of hot days here.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the high temperatures have been for the last few days, but I'm like, I know they were pretty darn warm.
And in mid to high 80s, which if it's humid, that is pretty darn warm.
Yeah. So all right, so we'll just wait and see what the weather does bring. We are an election year, but not talking about just our election year. But we've just gone through and seen elections in Mexico, India, and South Africa. Mexico elected their first female president ever, Claudia Sheinbaum. She is as left, if not more left, than AMLO, who she's succeeding. And I think I guess she got a tighter grip than AMLO will have in terms of things. And then Modi won in India, but he lost seats in parliament, so that's going to be a little tricky for him.
And still controls it, right?
Right.
They lost some, but they still
control. And the ANC also, they probably will control things, but they also lost, seats. So we've got Mexico. It's in kind of interesting contrast here. Mexico is going to be as strong, if not stronger, in terms of the kind of the left governing, whereas India and South Africa are going to face a little change in the sense of they're going to have to look for some coalition governments to form the government, and that could be interesting rather than because I think Modi lost, I think they're down about 55, 60 seats, which was or something like that, so it was fairly substantial, and so now he's got coalitions. Coalitions are tricky things, as Netanyahu sees in Israel, right? I mean, he's kind of barely there. He's trying to keep things together. There's all kinds of arguments about stuff that anything could potentially topple the government there. And India, I mean, Modi he's been there for quite a while, and which has given India uh, a lot of stability, much more stability than I can recall seeing in a long time there. But this is almost like a little crack that's opening there. I kind of wonder, with all these countries, what do you say? I mean, much change, little change. Are we going to see change?
Modi, I think little change. Yeah, they lost some seats, but they retained control, and there's people on the other side he can do business with. I really don't see a whole big old bunch of change there. ANC, that's the first step on a long highway, right, towards getting the government out of the hands of people who are running the country in the ground. But that does show you that the voters have recognized that the ANC is running the country into the ground. And what else we're talking about? Mexico. I don't know that we get a lot of difference out of that. I think their posture toward us won't change as long as Biden is president. Trump wins, then the math will change really quickly for her, and she'll have some tough decisions to make because he's not going to mess around about the border, and he's going to be sending some amount of people, probably not every single person that snuck in illegally during the Biden administration, but some amount of people back across the border. And that'll cause problems for her, and she will have to learn to deal with it. And Trump will probably offer her something that makes it not so bad, but if she's dealing with Trump, then her math of what she wants to do and her posture toward the United States will change dramatically.
What I find interesting about India and and South Africa is just that while the ruling party kind of went backwards and things like that, the voters showing some dissatisfaction with what's going on there. The problem is that the parties there wasn't enough support, right, for anybody else to take control. So maybe in India you'll get a little bit of change. I mean, maybe Modi will realize he's not quite so invincible, but once again, he still has the majority of the parliament in terms of he just needs a handful of votes. Really, he doesn't need a ton to put the whole coalition into majority. So he's still going to have kind of a controlling, figure, and the same for the ANC. But I look at the ANC in particular, and I'm like, okay, so they've been ruling the country for decades, and the thing is that Africa, anything that once you're going into any kind of thing that deals with Africa, whether or not it's South Africa, whether or not it's West Africa, whatever, there's so much corruption that tends to feed into all of these countries, which is unfortunate, but it is pretty much the fact of what happens there. Is that what will really change in the long run? Or is this just are there going to be does the ANC find a way to grease the palms of people to say this is how you come along with me, and then this is how we're going to do things, and everybody's going to benefit, but we're going to benefit this way. But the people are still not going to be really any better off at all. That's what always bothers me, I think, about these countries when you have these coalitions and you've had, just a history of corruption, is that, the people rarely get to see the change that they deserve and that they need to be able to really have a decent standard of living, because it's the people at the top that are just kind of skimming everything off and leaving everybody else to suffer. I don't know the answer to this.
So years ago, when here's I think an answer that is underappreciated, that people pass by, that could make a big difference in these debates. And that is, when I worked at the Heritage Foundation, one of my jobs was they put out the Index of Economic Freedom every year, right? And so I would do the various. There was like 5 or 6 releases towards the different parts of the world, and they would present the findings in like Hong Kong and Paris and various places around the world to show this. They would have events for it and so forth, and I would write the collateral, right? And one of the things that was really obvious in that is that corruption is they mark that down. You lose a lot of points on your economic freedom grade if there's corruption, if there's a big amount of corruption, right? And the reason for that is because it cuts off economic growth, right? No one wants to. You can't invest in a country if you can't be sure that like your disputes will be handled properly. If people owe you money, courts will force them to pay. All that kind of stuff, right? That's all things that you kind of look at, and you got to say, you know, you can't ever get out of your trap, out of your poverty, right, until you get past your corruption. It has to come first. People don't realize that, but it has to come first. Somebody's got to get in charge whose interest is not enriching themselves.
Yeah, I mean, and that has been a problem, for major corporations that are, that have tried to invest or have invested in a lot of these countries over the years. A lot of, for minerals, for oil and gas and other types of things, is that they're obviously trying to make money, by investing in the countries, but there's that huge risk factor, that they have to consider about, will we be able to, profit by this and meet the goals that we had thought we were going to do. If you do an analysis, you say, based on whatever is in the ground or whatever, you're like, this could benefit both sides. I mean, we pay the countries a royalty for what we take out, and we get the resources we need, and we make a profit at that, and so it's kind of a win-win. But with all the corruption and sometimes the overnight changes and things that will happen in governments, is that then what do you wind up with? You sometimes find out that the company that you had, the resources you had, your assets get seized, right?
Right. You have to have that dealt with fairly and all that. That is a sine qua non. It can't go on without it.
Here's Bob here.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. South America is right there with them, and a lot of Europe.
Right. I mean, this is a problem that exists across the globe, but I'm glad that Bob. I think we're all in agreement on Africa. It is just about the worst. I mean, I've got a good friend of mine from Burkina Faso, and he, I think he's, what was he now? 70. He'll be 76 in July, and he will constantly talk to me when I see him about what happens, about his country, about
Eastern Europe, Eastern Central Europe, very corrupt.
He's a person, he's been here for probably a couple of decades. He loves his homeland. Okay, I mean, he had a good job in his homeland and everything like that. He was pretty successful there. He fled. He's done okay, but then he's had some rough patches along the way. But one thing that he never stops at is that even as he gets older, is trying to find a way to talk to people, about how can we affect change, in my homeland and everything like that. And he'll say, do you know anybody in the State Department, and all these kinds of things, and stuff like that. And I know a guy who's been working in the State Department for a number of years, and so just I do chat with him to say, okay, so tell me the truth. What are the real odds here? Because I'm already coming in here pretty skeptical about stuff. And the layers of bureaucracy and all of this stuff is that I think it's harder for him. He's so passionate about trying to solve the problems of Burkina Faso. He doesn't really see all the layers of bureaucracy that are in between, and how many people are going to take up Burkina Faso as their cause. It's a tiny country, so you can't get involved in every little thing, and so it's unfortunate, right? I mean, it's just how this all goes. Yeah, and as Bob said, I mean, Eastern Europe, yeah, we have that problem. I mean, post Soviet Union, I think people thought, oh, great, no more communism, the communist bloc, the Soviet Union is broken up into these. Well, what did that lead to? That led to these guys,
The
basically,
crony capitalism,
yeah, yeah,
they
they
didn't
just,
stop being corrupt. The same people are in charge,
yeah, they were corrupt as part of the Soviet Union. Now they're corrupt as independent countries with some ties to Russia, right? I mean, there's a lot of them still have ties to Russia, kind of in that Russian orbit and everything like that. It didn't stop them from being any less corrupt. It is hard for the true, freedom loving, capitalist people to really succeed, because it's just the pressure, the everything that is so ingrained in these cultures just kind of leads you down this path. And it's one of those things. I don't know that, well, I'm pretty sure in my lifetime that problem will not be resolved. I'm not sure how many lifetimes it will take, if ever, if there'll ever be a way where we see the pendulum, swinging, enough on that, and kudos to Heritage for putting out that economic freedom. I remember when it first came out, it was kind of a revelation to see how everything was ordered up and all that kind of thing. And hopefully it made people think about all the different factors
yeah,
about
yeah. The thing I
economic
would say,
freedom.
the most useful thing about it was the things that it identified as being the drivers of economic growth or stagnation, right? So, like corruption is one of them, banking practices, regulatory barriers to entry, that kind of thing. So, when you start looking at all the ways that government affects what businesses are, it really, there really is a lot of things that governments of Africa and elsewhere could do to help themselves if they took corruption seriously.
Here's a
Yeah, that's right. It's a people use it. It's a very valuable, respected resource.
thumbs up for that. I do want to throw in as an aside. Well, I'll wait till the end for this, because there's another Heritage thing that came up this week that I wasn't expecting, but I thought was good news for them and some of our friends. All right, so since we last were on here last week, the jury came out, and convicted Trump on all 34 counts. They are, they're classified as felonies. It's been an interesting, roughly week, or so since this all happened. This I didn't expect him to go this way. In the one hand, on the other hand, if you look at the judge's instructions and everything else, it's like maybe it shouldn't be as big a surprise as it was. But
Looks like he was told to get a conviction and don't worry about whether it's overturned on appeal.
right, the way, I've read those jury instructions, and I'm not a lawyer, but I'm just like, it seems that he kind of, the judge kind of boxed them in anyway. Kind of
Yeah,
said,
he railroaded Trump,
yeah,
and
kind
he
of
doesn't really
basically,
care because, like, he was told, don't care if it gets overturned because by the time it's overturned, the election will be behind us.
yeah. And so Alvin Bragg gets to brag about things, haha, about getting his thing,
his convictions or whatever. Okay,
yeah,
but two other things happened in court last week too, right? That sort of counteract that. They don't get as much attention because, like, as we know, the media covers what the media covers. But Ashley Biden stipulated to her diary, right? They put the people in jail who took the diary and tried to sell it to James O'Keefe. And they went to trial. So she had to show up and say, yes, that's my diary. And yes, the stuff in it is the stuff in it. And yes, it's accurate, right? That was part of what she had to do to achieve the conviction. So the diary's in the record now. If the diary is part of a trial record, it's used as evidence to convict someone. There's no more denying what the diary says, right? Which is that Joe serially molested his daughter. So Trump may be an adjudicated felon, but Biden is an adjudicated child rapist, right? It's by the same standard, by even a stronger standard. And the other thing that happened is, as the son, Hunter Biden, has gone on trial now in Delaware for his gun charges for getting a federal firearm license by saying he wasn't using drugs when he was obviously using drugs very heavily. And the laptop, the Hunter Biden laptop, was admitted as evidence and accepted as evidence. And so by the government produced the laptop, actually took the physical laptop there and said, what's in here is truly Hunter Biden's. and there's no Rudy fixed it up and the Russians did whatever. This is Hunter Biden's laptop with Hunter Biden's content on it, and he's responsible for what's there. So those are two things that they cannot deny anymore, and that put Hunter and Joe Biden at the center of some pretty seriously criminal acts.
Right, right. Yeah, on this Trump trial, which I do want to spend some more time on, it's Trump was kind of typical Trump with his reaction, right? The outrage and everything like that. They raise a ton of money,
Yeah,
off of
$53
that.
million bucks. And
Yeah,
now it's over 200 million.
yeah, they've raised a ton of money because of this, and I mean, I'm even thinking about throwing in a few bucks just
Yeah,
because
me too.
I'm outraged about this, and I'm not the Trump rah guy. I mean, I've been because I have issues with his mouthing off and his behavior at times, but over his policies were fine and things like that. But this is the kind of thing where I just feel that there was a lot of railroading going on,
Yeah,
for
it's
him.
unfair. There's a lot of I don't really like Trump, but I will crawl across broken glass to vote for him now, right? To just because of this, right? They went too far. They shot the hostage. They, they had something they were holding over his head, and then they used it, right? And so now you're like, okay, you showed you were willing to completely pervert justice to get your political opponent, to stick a conviction on your political opponent, right? You have no principles. Right. So
Right.
now we're fighting people who want to run the country with no moral or ethical principles whatsoever. That's right. Because, those 51 people, that's the other thing, they keep talking about day one. What will Trump do day one? One thing should be indictments for those 51 people for election interference. Right? They knowingly lied to protect one candidate in favor of another.
Yeah. So I mean, I also go as I think about the Trump case too. It's just like, Bragg managed to get these 34 charges, set up as felonies, where at best
Right.
they would have been misdemeanors, right?
Right.
And and now we'll have a sentencing, just days before the Republican National Convention. And the judge has got a lot of leeway there because he could give Trump some time, or he could just let him off and give him probation or do whatever, and things like that. But the judge he just seems to show that I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't try to sentence him to something, give him some time, because of this behavior that we have seen there. But you see people who are not Trump supporters. I mean, you've got the never Trumpers, and some anti-Trumpers, and they've kind of, like you said, walking across broken glass and stuff like that. Yeah, I think you start to see a changed mindset where people are saying, wait a minute, what has just happened here? How many times have we heard the term banana republic being used,
right.
After this ruling, and things like that? I mean, it's coming out everywhere. I mean, we are not a banana republic, but boy, the way this whole thing has been run, you can't blame people from saying, why not compare us to banana republic based on the way this whole trial was run, and everything like that. So I don't know. I mean, liberals coming to his cause. I mean, he has some of those, mega donor type of people. The liberals are saying, they're gonna. I guess they're writing him big checks now, and they never would have done that beforehand.
Right.
So
A lot of Silicon Valley, a lot of money people have come off the sidelines for Trump now too.
yeah,
Right. They don't think the money is safe under Biden.
Right. And I mean, and you even have, RFK Jr., who's ostensibly trying to, run for president, right? I mean, he's on some state ballots and things like that. I mean, he called it a travesty of justice. I mean, so when you have that, you have that compared to Joe Biden. The administration is basically, nobody is above the law, which hopefully, he'll be reminded of with his son, right?
Right.
And maybe himself, right?
So that's it. What's interesting about that one is he's going to be in a box here before long because the son is going to be convicted. The evidence is overwhelming, right? So what does he do then? Does he allow the son to go to jail? Does the son go to jail quietly? Does the son not share a few secrets on his way through the door? Does he not tell Joe, if you want all this kept quiet, you better pardon me? What is he going to do? Is he willing to go to jail for all this? I don't think so. I'd be, you've taught this guy to be a selfish, self-dealing criminal his entire life, right? And now, the moment you need him, you're going to be able to trust him. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at the makeup of the jury, and I wasn't quite sure exactly how the jury was going to handle all of this, whether or not they would wind up being sympathetic in any way.
There's one that they're worried about hanging the jury, but you always got to worry about that.
Yeah, I mean, compared to the Trump case, one of the things I heard too is just that people had, the pundits or whatever, the analysis was always just like how smoothly that trial ran because they didn't need to go to the alternates and things like that. In the end, the jurors that they selected, hung in there and went through that. But I don't know. I mean, I'm just still trying to sort out how we get a judge like that, in this case, that is allowed to give instructions that gives the jury really no wiggle room on how they're supposed to come down with a decision. I mean, to me, it's like if you have, I mean, they're not Supreme Court justices, obviously, or things like this. But when you have the legal experts on CNN, or you've got a Jonathan Turley, who have watched numerous legal cases over their lifetime, and they're questioning, how these charges and everything like this, and then they see on all 34 counts, you just begin to wonder about the fairness of anything and of all.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they'll make up, and then see that hurts our country. It's like the same thing we were talking about earlier. You have all these people that don't want to do business in New York anymore, right? Because they're like, if you're going to go after people over politics like this and make up charges to go at their businesses and make up charges to try to destroy them like this, it's not safe to do business in your state. So, right now it's the financial leader of the country, but that 10 years from now, it could be a very different situation because of the business climate New York is creating with these prosecutions of Trump.
Yeah, I mean, it has been known as a financial center for us for a long, long time, and you've got London, also being a big financial capital as well. But we have
it doesn't have to stay that way,
right? It doesn't have to stay that way. I mean, look, it's there are businesses there's large businesses in all parts of the country, depending. All right, we've got Silicon Valley out on the West Coast. We saw some movement, during the pandemic where people where companies realize is like, if we can use a remote workforce, we don't necessarily have to be in a high tax, high regulatory state. We can go somewhere else, and do that. And now apparently, kind of Florida, Miami has become a hotbed, for companies like this moving in down there. So much so that inflation is running pretty hot down there, where housing prices, rental
housing
prices,
all over Florida is a deal.
It's just
because so many people want to be there, because of the way the government is run.
Right, and it's shifting. I mean, you would, if you're running a business, you probably would prefer to be in a state where Ron DeSantis and the Republicans are being very business friendly, versus Kathy Hochul in New York and the Democrats, which are very anti-business and are throwing up these things. And then the Trump trial is an example of like, well, gosh, if he can be convicted of trumped up, felony charges for that, how do we protect our executives against anything that can happen? I mean, I've always had a problem with, lawsuits that are filed at the drop of a hat, and, just a lot of frivolous things that go on there. This seems to, to be opening the door to potentially a lot of frivolous lawsuits because you don't agree with whatever's going on, egged on. and even egged on, really, even to the extent of the Consumer Financial Protection Board, this Elizabeth Warren monster creation. Let's go after the big corporations for everything from A to Z, right?
Right.
Bob had a comment in here.
Yeah, could be. It could be.
And that was part of my question too.
It's a pretty simple. It's a pretty simple crime. It's not against substance abuse. It's against having a federal firearm license when you're a druggie.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll require some skill by the lawyers. That's for sure.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, it will be. The jurors have got to separate any of their personal feelings about drug use one way or the other from this. They have to look at the merits of the case, the facts of the case, and decide on the facts, and let that be. I'm assuming that based on what I had read in terms of any sympathy they had, because they had family members that had drug problems, or they were gun owners or whatever, and things like that, that they were seated because they swore that they would do this. Because you have this process of jurors, jury selection, where you can get struck down. You can get struck.
Yeah, for voir dire, you have each side can throw out so many, and the judge can throw out so many. So.
Right. Yes, and this is the $1 million question: is that will they do that? I don't know.
Right, because it's a weird case where both sides are essentially on the side of the defense.
Yeah, so we'll have to wait and see. So we still have, even though we've got the presumptive nominees out there, in Biden and in Trump, we still have primaries that have been running. Interesting thing too. I think this came up since we last talked, right? Or not? Where they're doing the virtual nomination in Ohio to get Biden on the ballot. I can't remember if we discussed that last week or not.
Right. So what happened was Biden, the Ohio requires you to name your official nominee before what would have been before the Democrat convention. So Biden was not going to be on the ballot there. So they passed a law in Ohio. The governor called the legislature back in and passed a law that said, if they'll hurry up and do it, we'll let Biden be on the ballot this time. Much as I would love to see Biden's incompetence, and the Democrats arrogance, and having Ohio is not the only state that's having to deal with this. So Alabama, and I think there's one or two more, also have had to make exceptions for them because of their late convention date. It's don't have that late a convention, right? That's too late. You have to do it earlier. You're not above the law either, So, one time mistake and get it straightened out. And, Trump's going to win Ohio and Alabama anyway. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, this is that other question to me. It's just that these laws are on the books, and it may be the case where they've gone ahead and made these exceptions in the past for the candidates, but why do they have to do that? It's look, stick to the law. Just go look at it. Just don't assume that these states are going to keep amending things for this exception.
Right, you fix it. Set your convention date for the right date.
Right.
You have election lawyers working for y'all, don't you?
Yeah.
Right. You ask them, how late can we do this? And they can tell you. They can look it up. It doesn't take them long.
Yeah, and when the Republicans in Ohio, initially the state, they weren't willing to make that change. They were the bad guys, right? It's
right.
Well, they shouldn't be held out to
take care of your business, Democrats. You screwed this up.
Yeah, what the dates are. Stick, just get your convention. There's nothing, there's no reason they couldn't do their conventions, or especially when you have, an incumbent president. I mean, you're going to wrap this up. You already know who your nominee is. You can go ahead and move that early. You can, you've already finagled, your primary calendar to do a lot of things. You don't have to have your convention date as late as you set it. And so it's, if the Republicans can set an earlier date, you can set an earlier date. I mean, I think we've seen conventions within a week of each other in the
Right.
past.
It's usually 1 week, and then the other one's the following week.
Yeah, they're almost kind of like back to back. So which gets them out of the way rather than having them spaced out. And then all of a sudden finger pointing is like, oh, the Republicans, the bad Republicans, they're not letting Biden get on the ballot. They won't amend the law to do that. It's like, but the law was there first. Calendar date for getting your convention, you could do this anytime.
Right.
You can say, oh, here's the date. Our convention is going to take place 5 days before that, or whatever. It's unbelievable that this how they try to hold that off there for that. But anyway, so we had primaries. John Tester's got an opponent now, and some other places. I guess the Trump endorsed candidate in New Jersey for Senate lost. I don't know anything. I haven't been following the race up in New Jersey very much, so I don't know whether or not the person who won, is any stronger. I mean, Andy Kim is now the Democrat nominee for Senate, U.S. Senate, but Menendez is kind of hanging. He's lurking out there because he's going to run as an independent, and I guess he's turned in a petition with more than enough names. I guess he just has to get it certified to get on the ballot in the fall, and so he'll be out there, which annoys Andy Kim to no great degree, which I'm not surprised at, because he's like, oh, I didn't think he was necessarily really going to be in the race. But Menendez, I mean, he's probably still got his supporters, right? And how many votes can he pull? Will he pull away if he actually does this? Does he pull away enough voters and allow the Republican to come through?
Yeah, it's a possibility, because Republicans are going to be united, and they're going to get a pretty good bit of independent votes. So you'll have a chance if the Democrats can't unite and really, deal with the Menendez situation.
What about with the kind of this whole thing in Montana? They've been trying to defeat Tester for a number of years. They continue to fail. Is this the year they finally flip that seat back?
It could be, and it should be, but you don't never know. A lot of people are moving into Montana. They're not coming from conservative areas, right? So he'll have a chance. That'll be a close race. That'll be a good race.
Yes. Once again, you underscore the other issue that happens in the Great West, is that the migration of people, from California, Washington State, Oregon, things like that, where they've sold their overpriced, high-priced homes. I don't know who they're selling them to exactly. Maybe, I guess, all the software and whatever, billionaires and whatnot, and then they move to what was before at least cheaper housing, in other states. Include Idaho, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, all of these states, Nevada, Montana, Wyoming. All these states have been seeing an influx of all these other people who tend to vote Democrat, moving into their areas and starting to change the complexion of, our solidly red. The solidly red states are not as solidly red as they used to be. They're still red, though. We've already seen that kind of switch in Arizona, which is not like it used to be, decades ago. And so, Utah has pockets where the liberals have made. I know enough people who live in Utah who are, conservatives, and I think they're kind of like, where do these people come from? Not necessarily even from the voting perspective, but just what they've done to push up housing prices in those areas.
Right.
People who are native, Utahns, Idahans, things like that. They're like,
the biggest thing going on in the West right now is out migration from California. Two good states in the country for out migration are California and New York, followed by Illinois. What do they have in common? Who knows, right? Hawaii is up there. Louisiana's up there. Louisiana was governed by Democrats for a long time and still kind of looks like it. In migration, the leaders are who you would expect: Florida, Texas, Tennessee, the states that open their economy and make it friendly to make money there.
So places that potentially, even though these people are moving into these other states, still, the population shift could be enough to give them more seats in Congress, you know, in the
Yeah,
next.
California gained seats in every census from the time it joined the Union in 1849 until the census of 2000. It lost two that time. It lost two in 2010. It lost one in 2020, and it's already lost one and a half, close to two this decade worth of population. Already lost about close to 1 million people population since 2020. So, by the end of the decade, there should be well over two and maybe even to three more representatives lost. California is emptying out at an alarming rate. And almost the entire cause is bad governance.
And yet Gavin Newsom, I think he's looking at what, 2028.
Yeah, please run on your record too.
Yeah,
that would be great.
Vote for me. Yeah, I did such.
Look what I've done. I ran a big state. The biggest state of all. Look how I did.
I've allowed these high minimum wage laws to go into effect, so that I can chase out, jobs and, turn them into automation outright, not just lose them.
Where to make up for it, I've allowed huge tent cities of drug addicts to line the streets of all my major cities.
Yeah, I was talking to my wife, and she's kind of got the itch. She's like, we need to go somewhere, and I'm like, well, Spencer had a list of different places to go to. Some were involved national parks in different states and whatnot, and things like that. And I don't think she's as interested, but I thought, California, at least it used to be, it's like you could go to some places in California and spend a few days and have a nice little vacation and enjoy it.
Yeah.
But I'm struggling because I'm like, do I want to go to San Francisco? I mean, I don't know. I mean, the city is it's
in such a mess, and they're abandoning all the commercial real estate, and the downtown is dying, the restaurants are closing. It's a bad scene, all caused by Joe Biden / Gavin Newsom leftist policies. Yeah, I mean, this is really a policy, a display of like what works in policy, which of these plans works, and theirs does not work.
Yeah. So then I thought about Southern California, and then I was like, then I still remember, when I used to travel to Southern California frequently, even then you'd see homeless people here and there in LA. And, it's been a while since I've been to LA. I'm thinking like, that situation I know has only worsened. Do I really want to bring my wife to a situation where that has ballooned and just created a safety hazard, I think, on top of that. So it's, I don't know how tourism has been in California overall, because they still, I think, have tourist draws from, Disneyland to the San Diego.
Great natural wonders. The whole end to end of that state. It's a gorgeous state.
Yeah.
It has more in the way of natural wonders than any other state.
Yeah. So, but I just have this thing that just kind of says, I don't know if I want to do that. Maybe I just need to rejigger and say, we'll take a visit to another state, which is just safer, just where things have not deteriorated, and everything like that. So we'll have to wait and see how that all turns out. But that is, what liberalism has done to the United States is really starting to create these separations of, you've got, like you said, the out migration. Where are they moving? People are moving to these areas that they think befit. I mean, we have I'm not sure what drove them in the end. I don't think they're really political. This relatively young couple at church, they've got 3 kids, and but they've sold their home, and they're going to move to Knoxville and set up shop there. And I think the allure of lower cost of living, and just kind of the whole thing, the housing should be cheaper, the taxes should be lower, and all of these kinds of things, that even if you're not overtly political, you will still look for things. You want the economic benefit. of what,
Right.
what works for you. Because I was talking to a woman the other day about, how these things are going. It's like, how many, it wasn't that long ago, right? Where I could have sold my home and gotten a decent price. A few years ago, I probably would have broken even at best because the housing market this was kind of soft and mushy. But go back several years, probably could have sold my home and then bought a home somewhere else for a lot less, but still give me almost the same amount of square footage, or I could downsize, and kind of bank the difference, but still be happy because how much of a house do I need at my age with just the two of us here, that kind of thing like that. But now it's like I sell my house. Where do I move to, that I can buy another house, that say I want to buy a 3,000 square foot home. It probably will cost me just about as much as I would get for selling my home now in a lot of areas that I would find, desirable, or, where I would be willing to live. And it's like, this is how crazy things have been. It's like,
Right. Plus, the increase in the mortgage alone is basically double the price of average house.
right, right. And it kind of, right. The interest rates being where they are, people are stuck, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I've paid off my mortgage. I mean, I don't have a mortgage, so I have the freedom to go do things. But for those that have got 3% mortgages but face a 7% mortgage, that also tells them, it's like, I think I'm stuck here.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
some people go ahead and bite the bullet, right? They go ahead and they sell their home even though they had a low interest mortgage and they're going to be paying more in, a higher interest mortgage elsewhere. But if the house is a little bit cheaper, but they get more bang for their buck, they can make it work. And then,
Right.
hopefully interest rates will drop enough, the next year or two, that they could refinance. And then and then they
Yeah.
start seeing
You need to, if you want all that to happen, you need to vote for Trump.
yeah,
It's
right. I
not
mean,
going
I
to
think,
happen under Biden.
yeah, I think that's what we've seen at this point, is that the policies of the Biden administration are just not really friendly for the average consumer. And
Right.
He hasn't been able to find the language or anything like that that really works, right? I mean, you talked about this before, how they had dropped Bidenomics, and then I think they tried to revive it, and then they pulled back again because inflation, started to kind of flatline. It wasn't going. The rate of inflation wasn't really dropping like it had been in the previous months. It's been kind of steady, maybe down a tick, up a tick, but it means that the Federal Reserve is looking at something that's they're not going to act on interest rates anytime soon. Therefore, Bidenomics, how do you tout Bidenomics when those things are still going on out there? People are still feeling the real sting
Right.
of
Right.
inflation. And
You
that's
keep telling them there's no inflation and things are getting better. And why don't people understand how great this economy is? Right.
right,
It's because it's not great. It's not great.
right,
You're saying employment. Okay. It's like, all right, employment, first of all, Americans, that's one of the things. It's like, it's been a huge campaign of BS, for lack of a better term, of the Biden administration to talk about jobs numbers. We increased jobs, zillions, and Trump left office with fewer jobs, everything. Everyone knows that that's because of the pandemic, right? Those people weren't working because they were ordered not to work, and as soon as they could come back to work, that, because of PPP and other stuff Trump did to put the economy in good standing, they snapped back. They came back to work. So now you have all these job gains that Biden tries to take credit for. He's not done any policies that increase jobs in any degree. Full-time employment's down. Manufacturing employment is down. What's up is part-time employment, government employment, healthcare employment. Right. In other words, we're getting sicker and tireder, and we need more medicine. And that is what that's where all the action is. Right. It's like, it's not that we're getting to be a healthy, vibrant economy. It's we're getting to be sick, old people. Right. Which is not, that's not no sign of economic growth whatsoever. So, these people, you're looking for, what is Biden promising you on that? He's promising you more of the same, right? He's like 3 or 4% inflation, 1% growth, if that, right? They downgraded their growth numbers down to below 1%. Trump had it up over 4, almost to 5. Okay, no one ever talks about that. That's the only way you deal with the deficit and the debt and all that, is you get growth rate up enough to pay for it, right? And no effort's being made to do that. If we could just have this argument about economics, I think Trump wins, 40, 45 states.
Right. And it seems that Biden has had this awakening now. It's like, I got to do something about the border. So here's an executive action. But what's in the executive action?
Yeah. Once 2,500 people a day get through, according to our estimates, then we will start doing whatever it is we promised to do that we should have been doing all along, and then he's trying to put some Trump policies back in place, right? He's trying to do back the things that he undid just to spite Trump, which really hurt him politically. I think people see straight through it, and they see that it's a follow through. They tried to come back with their, bring back their Rhino / Democrat immigration bill and try to pass it again. And they said no. The House passed HR2. And I don't understand, my next job is going to be messaging for the Republican Party, because I haven't heard any of them say this. They're like, the other guys are hitting you. We passed a strong bipartisan border bill, and y'all won't even. No. You passed a bill with a Rhino and a bunch of Democrats, right? No one asked MAGA what they thought of that bill at all. It doesn't reflect MAGA's priorities at all. And, voila, MAGA doesn't support it. Okay. MAGA did support HR2, which you have ignored. The Senate has ignored, which actually is a border security bill aimed at reducing illegal crossings at the border rather than formalizing and making the process more efficient, right? Streamlining the process. We don't want the process streamlined. We want no immigrants coming in, okay? That's what we're trying to achieve illegally, right? Nobody coming in illegally. Trump is shooting for that goal. Biden is shooting for setting up the logistics, right? And people can see the difference.
Yeah, the thing too is that some of this stuff that with executive action goes back to, like you said, goes right back to what Trump had done, which they complained was illegal, right?
Right. And they're telling him it's illegal.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't care. You didn't care. That's the other thing. No one ever talks about it. Biden, Trump's lawless. Okay. He's a threat to democracy. Okay. Well, the courts told Biden not to forgive any more student loans. And he's gone right on forgiving student loans because he thinks it helps him. And he's going to lose 30 and under because even those guys can see that it's just a naked pander.
Right. All right. Let's wrap it up. Brian, take us out.
Take us out. Let me find what we did not discuss. Sally Busby out at the Post. More changes to come. Newspapers hemorrhaging money, and
they lost over $70 million.
Yeah. And they have the meeting where they announce it to the staff and everything. And question, yes, you got any question? Yeah. Were any female minority candidates considered for the editorship? That's really what they got asked. I'm like, lady, you're losing $70 million a year. We got to find people who can run it, right? If that's them, they'll be the one. Otherwise, this is not going to be a DEI hire, right? It is interesting about the NFL teams not doing the Pride Month. I believe Pride Night at the Nats is tonight. So baseball, some of baseball is still in it. MLB has banned a player for life for gambling, which I think is the appropriate response. You cannot. There's a lot of these games and a lot of people competing for the sports entertainment dollar now. If your games are thought to be fixed or thought to be the possibility of them being fixed, you're dead. Your league dies within weeks. Pete Rose cannot come back. This guy cannot come back. No more. If you gamble, you go away for life, and it cannot ever be undone.
All right, good. Let me quickly wrap up. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Hope you enjoyed it. Please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America, and we will see you again next week.